Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. Today we have one of the greatest newsmakers who's ever graced the Fox 10 building here, which has been around a long time. This guy's a legend, and we're about to say goodbye to him, and we're going to try to give him a proper send-off over the next 2 weeks on this program. Dave Munsey. Take a look.
Arizona is a beautiful place to live. We have the most wonderful weather in the world.
News Center 10's Dave Munsey.
People who live in our state find that they have more time to be active with their leisure time because our environment affords them that. My job as a weatherman is to help direct people in a good use of that leisure time. What is the weather going to be like, and what should we do on this particular day?
Dave Munsey, part of the team on News Center 10.
Wow. Congratulations, buddy.
Thank you, Johnny.
42 years.
Yeah.
This just doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't. It did, but it
Thank
doesn't
God.
that much, yeah. It was, you know, I remember like my third or fourth day here. I remember sitting in a chair and just kind of looking around thinking, well, what if I just stayed here forever? I mean, just what if I just made a career out of this building? And at the time, I was doing morning radio. I wasn't thinking TV at all.
You were Cool Radio, Cool
I was
FM.
at Cool FM. It was this building had 2 radio stations and a TV station, and had Cool AM, Cool FM, and Cool TV. And I ended up working for all 3 of them.
Okay, so when you get here, what year are we talking?
1975.
Okay, so you're working at Cool FM, and that was a big deal to get that gig because that was a big break for you, right?
That was real big. In fact, that was a long process. What happened is I was working at KUPD. I'm not even sure if there is a KUPD anymore.
Oh yeah, there is.
It still
I
out there?
think yeah.
I started working at KUPD. I was doing midnight to 7. Before that, I was down in Casa Grande. So, I mean, I could do the whole story, but we'd be here forever.
No. You know, it's good because you and I share a common background. We worked at the same radio station in Casa Grande.
That's right. We worked at a little station there. I was ready to make that my life down there. I looked at homes and everything because they were talking about ownership, buying into it and stuff. It was a small station. Didn't work out.
KPIN.
Yep, KPIN.
Yep.
And then I came up here, and that's when I was at KUPD, and the guy that I worked for at KUPD came down here. Can't think of his name right now, but he came down here and started doing the morning show on the radio. So he brought me down here, and all I was doing was weekends and filling in. And they called me in and they offered me his job.
Wow.
And I said, hey, the guy hired me. I'm not taking his job. And so they gave it to somebody else. And a couple of months later, they came to me and said, will you take this guy's job? I said, oh, yeah, I'll take his job.
Okay, now, truth be told, by the way, folks, the only reason I've got notes is I've got tapes I want to play. I don't need any notes with Dave Munsey. Dave Munsey is a walking encyclopedia. I could just walk off the set, and you'd have a very great half-hour thank you. All right. When you were working in radio, as you said, this was all in one building. Yep. Were you kind of eyeing the TV operation and going,
No, I was not. I loved radio. I don't know if you remember Stan Freberg or not, but Stan Freberg was a pioneer in radio advertising, and he used to do a little bit about, here's something you can't do on TV. And it was bring in the ship, and you bring in the maraschino cherry, bring in the whipped cream, drop, you know. And he did all these things because all you had to do was talk about it.
Yep, imagination.
And, right. I mean, like I had an employee on the radio, the news guy, and he had been in the hospital, and so I set up the radio studio like it was a hospital room. Of course I didn't, but that's the way we talked about it. We had a nurse in there, we had all of this equipment, and people, of course, they're at home going, beep, beep, the guy's got him on life support down there.
That's a great bit.
You can't do that on TV.
No, you have to literally have it.
I had 5 or 6 characters that I did on the radio.
Right.
Yeah, I did all kinds of voices. I did a bit once when Joe Bonanno was missing from the prison.
The crime boss.
Well, yeah, he was the crime boss. He was down in Tucson.
Right.
And the feds had taken him out of the prison or taken him over to California. And they had not made a big deal about it. And all of a sudden somebody went, Joe Bonanno is missing from the Tucson prison. And it became a story. So on my radio show, I made a call down to the Tucson prison, which of course was a fake call. And I was the warden. The warden answered, okay, what can I do for you? Hey, what's going on with Joe Bonanno? And his answer was, yes, we have no Bonanno. We have no Bonanno. And so I get a phone call from the big guy, the owner of the station. Very calmly.
Tom Chauncey?
Very calmly, he said, I don't want to hear any more Joe Bonanno jokes.
He was worried about fallout.
I said, yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, he was worried about fallout.
Well, you know, they always said we were family, and I thought, well, I didn't know we were in that family.
Dave, I'll tell you, you are going to be missed. All right, I want to run some video. This is from, we believe, the 80s. Oh, wow. Well, you remember all these folks.
Oh, yeah.
There's Deborah Pyburn, right?
Yep.
And when you were doing this is probably 80s. Channel 10, give people a sense of how many. I mean, the ratings were off the chart back then.
Yes. We have to remember, though, that we were 3 stations.
Sure.
It was an NBC, an ABC, and then we had an independent station, ABC, NBC, CBS, and then an independent station in town as well. So it wasn't flooded like it is now. But yeah, we were up in the upper 20s, upper 30 in the. I believe the 10 o'clock news one night did a 54. Now, if you're in the business, that's phenomenal.
That's half of all television sets.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Now that would be that's unheard of.
Yeah, you can't do that with the Super Bowl
no.
even.
But I think their 10 o'clock news once did a 54 rating.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
You used to do your weather live almost all the time, didn't you?
Well, they created a newscast for me, and there's Bill Close.
Wow. Bill had passed away just a few years ago,
Yeah.
and you gave a tremendous eulogy for him. And as Dave typically does, if he does a eulogy for you, it's going to be comedy, and you're going to get blasted. I don't mean drunk. He's going to work you over a little bit, even though you're gone.
Well, you know, that was interesting because I was going to bring it, and I've just been so busy I have not had time to go look for it. But I have a note from Bill Close, and it's a little, we called them B-grams because he put a big B on the bottom of them. I got a B-gram from him, and it said, you have terrible eye contact with the camera. You have no empathy whatsoever with your audience. You will never do television at this station. And I end up doing the eulogy at the guy's funeral.
Right. Isn't that amazing?
Close friends, yeah.
Well, there's a lesson in that, but it's also interesting because you were starting to, they came to you, and it's worth talking about now. We'll take a little break from the tape. Who came to you first and said, you're doing a bang-up job on radio, but we want you to do the weather? Who was that?
We were at a party, and we were celebrating the ratings for the radio station. I had taken over the morning show, and it was our first rating period. And we had really done well. We had done better than they had ever done before, because my radio show was fantastic. I mean, I'll say that. People still call me and say, oh, I miss your radio show. I had character. I just had fun. So they had a ratings party, and it was at the Tempe Tennis Club. I don't even know if it's still out there or not. Homer Lane had a couple, and he came and sat at our table, and my wife and I, and he said, I want you to, have you ever thought of doing weather? That was his first question. I said, no, I hadn't. He said, well, you're going to be my weatherman. I want you to start making tapes where we want to see what you look like. It just happened just like that.
You got to be kidding. You're just getting the radio thing
We
wrong.
went home. I was just getting started in radio. We went home that night and we went, was he serious or had he had too much to drink? We were serious. We were going, is this real? And then I was supposed to show up and they were going to have a full crew down here. It was in the studio across the way here. They said, come down on Saturday, we'll have a full crew here. Well, I came down on Saturday, I had no idea. And there was a full crew down here. Yeah.
Oh, man. So you weren't sure they were serious.
I didn't know what was going on.
We call it Channel 10, still a lot of us around here. It had a history of keeping people, and that continues to this day.
Absolutely.
Keeping people for long stretches.
Well, I'll tell you, I told you this, I mentioned this earlier. When I first came here, you had to go to each and every department and sit down and meet with each and every department head. Every employee that came in went around and sat down with engineering, traffic, sales, the heads of those departments. Every one of them said one thing to me. Well, they said a lot of things, but one thing was consistent, and that was, we're a family. We are a family. And very few people, especially back then, left. Very few people left.
Right.
I was hurt. I had a back injury just a few months into my employment. I had no leave. I had no vacation time.
This is for TV? You injured your back?
I was working on radio at the time. But I was just starting to make the move into TV.
Right.
And we were scared. Bunny and I, we didn't have much money. I was in the hospital. I had a broken back. And the very first night, they did surgery on me the very first day. From 1 in the afternoon until 10 o'clock at night, I was in surgery.
Oh, Lord. Well, how did you break your back?
I broke skiing.
Water skiing.
Water skiing.
That's the one where you broke it water skiing up in North Dakota.
Yeah, up in North Dakota. I was. It was.
You
in
told me
Minnesota,
about that.
actually,
Okay,
yeah.
I thought maybe this was a different injury.
No, this is the same injury.
He hit a sandbar, by the way, folks. Very good water skier. He hit a sandbar going about how many?
Barefoot. I was barefoot skiing.
Barefoot
so we were going
skiing.
pretty fast. Yeah, we were going pretty fast, and we hit a sandbar, and that kind of broke us up here. But we had that injury. We were in the hospital, and Bun was. I'm totally devastated with this whole thing. And got home that night at 11:30, and there was a car in front of our house, and it was one of the managers from the station, and he just said, "We don't want you to think you're alone." They had money.
Wow.
They had, "What do you want us to shop for you? Do you need shopping?
You are kidding.
Do you have stuff you need mailed? Anything you need done, we'll do. You concentrate on Dave. We're family."
And that continues still.
Yep.
That feeling is still very much here.
That's why I'm still here.
That's exactly
Yep,
right.
yep.
That's exactly right. We're going to take a break.
I need to catch hold of himself.
This is one of the great guys, and I can't even calculate how many lives he has saved with Watch Your Kids Around Water. I can't tell you how many calls we've gotten at this television station. Somebody saying Dave mentioned it, and we thought, where's our daughter? Where's our son? This happened a lot. Dave Munsey, Watch Your Kids Around Water, probably the signature program that he put together. We're going to talk about that and much more as we take a look back at a remarkable guy, my good friend, and I'm so fortunate to have worked with him for so many years. Dave Munsey, back in a minute. It's the easiest show I've ever done, but it's the hardest. Dave Munsey, my guest on Newsmaker Sunday. After 42 years, he is retiring from Channel 10/Fox 10.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about calling it quits?
Well, it's bittersweet. You know, it's I love doing what I do. One of the best parts of what I do is communicating with people, meeting people, being around people. My wife always says, "You like to walk through the middle of a crowd, never around it," and that's exactly true. I do.
Did you miss radio when you left radio? For a while, you were trying to do both.
Mm-hmm.
You left, you were at Cool Radio doing a morning show and trying to do weather, and you tried to do both for a while.
Yeah. I tried to do both. It was something that I could have done. Didn't bother me in the least. I love that work schedule. The work's never bothered me.
But you're going all day.
I've worked since I was 8 years old, and I've never stopped working. I've always worked, and it didn't bother me to have those two jobs. And when I left, what happened is TV said they didn't want me to be in radio. They said, "We want all your time over here."
No kidding.
Yeah, so that's why I...
You talked about working since you were 8. Your father owned a restaurant and bars in North Dakota, right?
Yep.
So that's where you kind of, is this where you picked up this gift of gab, for lack of a better?
Well, yeah, a lot of that, from my dad, you know, I grew up in an adult world. I grew up around adults. I grew up in bars. I grew up in working with, my dad got the catering job as they put the road through back in the 50s. And I was about 7 or 8 years old, and we started working for my dad catering out
to the highway crew?
Out to the highway crew. And, you know, my dad would be over serving a bunch of guys, and we'd be over with the water crew, and he'd go, "Hey, kid, did you hear about that?" So on the way home, I'm going, "Hey, Dad, did you hear about the..." My dad's going, "Hey, that's a good one." You know, so, yeah, you're just... what ended up was my dad ran the Elks Club. And
you're developing an interesting vocabulary at this point.
Oh yeah, stories I had. I mean, my brother and I, we were just little kids, and we had adult jokes. Like, I mean, somebody would say, you know, "Can you tell a joke?" And I go, "Not here." You know. And it was funny because my dad ran the Elks Club, and they had a golf tournament every year. And he put my brother and I out on the 7th hole running a bar. We had drinks, wine, we had whiskey, we were mixing drinks out there. I was 12, my brother was 13. And it was a show out there. We absolutely put on a show. We put a stick on a tree, you know, it was about 4 feet off the ground. If you're this high, you can't order a drink. You know, it was just ridiculous. And we were out there telling jokes. There was a big pileup. So my dad, all of a sudden, he just said, hey, you know what? Every tournament, you guys are working we're working at the 7th hole. When you
were a young man, you were about 18, you got drafted, right?
Yes.
To serve in Vietnam.
Yes.
Kind of a double-edged sword, because that was a tough time, but at the same time, that started you down this path, did it not? Armed Forces Radio, you did some of that?
I did.
You opened shows with Bob Hope?
I tell you what happened there, and it was radio and a little bit of TV, but it was radio that got me out of the battlefield. It got me into a studio in Saigon. And
wow.
Let me tell you, that was a happy, happy day for me. And you're right, yeah, I was then asked to introduce Bob Hope at the USO show over in Long Binh. And I also did the Mass for Cardinal Cushing during that same period. When
you were an altar boy.
I was an altar boy, and but I did the Mass on radio. Cardinal Cushing was on radio, and they needed someone to interpret the Mass on radio. And it was mostly him speaking, but every once in a while I would come in and I would explain the canon of the Mass or something like that to him. And I at the time, I knew a lot of Latin, so because I'd done the Mass in Latin as an altar boy. So that was real good. And, so I was brought over to do the Mass. And they said while I was there, they said, would you like to introduce Bob Hope tomorrow? I went, well, yeah, sure.
And that, tell the story about when you later met Bob Hope, but that connection got you in to see him, right?
That's right. Well, Bob Hope's masseuse was on that trip. And Bob Hope's masseuse was the same masseuse that works at the Phoenix Country Club. And so whenever Bob went on tour, this guy would leave the Phoenix Country Club and go on tour with Bob Hope. And we did a story when Bob Hope went on a ship off of Berlin, or off of one of the war zones.
Okay.
It was the first time he had been back for a while, and I had introduced him at his last show. So they did that story on the fact that I had done that. And this guy called me. He said, hey, I remember you. We sat on, blah, blah, blah. We went on and on. He said, Bob's coming for the Phoenix Open. I'll get you together with him. And then we met again, so we were able to meet again. But Bob Hope apparently gets approached from a lot of people that said, I've met you in Vietnam. He asked for a picture. And I happened to have a picture of the two of us together in Vietnam. And so I brought that picture over with me. I have pictures of myself with Les Brown, the Dingalings, you know.
Yeah, sure. Everybody was on the USO tours.
Yeah, everybody was on the tour.
Dave, this business, one of the joys of it are the doors it opens to people that you would otherwise never meet or have a chance.
I was doing a solar show, a week-long solar series. And we were interviewing a few different people on it. John F. Long was building a solar community. It was a retirement community. And we went over there, we did a bunch of interviews with him, and he said, you know, Dave, I haven't named the place yet. We're thinking of a name. And I thought a few minutes, and I said, well, it's solar, it's retirement, it's being built by John F. Long. I said, why not call it So Long? He didn't like that. He thought about it. I don't think we can do that.
I thought you were going to say Sun City, and I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't know that about you.
No, just So Long. And, but also a big guy in solar back then was Barry Goldwater.
Right.
So we went up to his house one morning about 8 o'clock, and the camera broke. And we hadn't even started the interview. And they said, will you be good for about 45 minutes? We need to run to the station and fix the camera. And he said, sure. And as we were walking out the door, he said, hey, Dave, why don't you stay and have breakfast with me? And so I went, okay, sure. So I stayed, and he's slicing bread off of a loaf of bread. And he said, you know, Quentin Burdick gets this bread for me, and Quentin's been sick. So I have to be very careful because I can't get any. And I said, well, that's Rhodes frozen dough. They make that in my hometown. He said, no. I said, yeah. I said, let's call my dad. He's a Republican. So we call my dad. We get on Barry's phone and we call my dad. I said, Dad, guess who I'm standing here with? He said, well, I don't know who. I said, Barry Goldwater wants to talk to you. My dad's flabbergasted. And him and Barry just have a talk. They don't, I mean, they're not talking about bread or anything. They're just talking.
Right.
And so my dad ends up starting to send Barry Goldwater Rhodes frozen dough.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it. And so,
I guess you had a pretty good in with Barry Goldwater
well, he
after
gave
that.
me a private number, and in fact, I used it for the station several times. He said, you call this number, I'm the only guy that answers. And I used it a few times to ask him a few questions. But there was a, remember the, I don't know if they still have them, it was Women in Broadcasting luncheons that they put on.
Oh yeah.
Everybody was there.
Sure, I remember.
Everybody came.
Yep.
It was over at the Biltmore.
Yep, or at Phoenix Country Club, one of the two.
Yep, and Barry Goldwater was the master of ceremonies. And he came in through the hall, and as he was walking through, he was using a cane. And as he walked through, he saw me. And he stopped at our table, and of course, all of these guys, a lot of people had come in. I think our management team was from Cleveland then. And everybody stood up. And they were standing clapping anyway. And he kind of worked his way through everybody and put his arm around me and he said, how's your old man?
And so that impresses management from Cleveland.
I said, he's good. He's real good. I said, is he still sending you bread? He said, I just got a loaf the other day. And of course, now people are going, bread, loaf, what are they talking about here? And so then he says, looks at the crowd, the management crowd. He said, these guys treating you okay? I said, yeah, they're doing pretty good. He said, will you call me if you have trouble? He would just be a smart guy.
It's nice to have friends in high places.
He was just being a smart guy. But you know what? I'll tell you what happened after that. I walked out of that, and I was approached by 5 or 6 different radio stations wanting an interview. What's this relationship? What's going on here? And it's just one morning we went up to do an interview, and the camera broke.
We're taking a break with Dave Munsey, legendary weatherman from Channel 10, 42 years on the air. Dave's decided to retire. We were shocked. Back in a minute with Dave Munsey as we remember and look back. Final moments of part 1 of our conversation with Dave Munsey, who is leaving Fox 10 after 42 years. We're going to get into more history in the next segment, which you'll see next weekend. But Dave, just a couple of thoughts here as we part on this, if people don't see the second segment. What would you like people to think back on in your time here, and what's been the most significant?
Water safety. I want people to remember that I dedicated my entire career to water safety.
How did that come to you?
I never ever let down water safety. I worked 30 weekends a year. I went to every event. I met with people who had lost children. I stood in the hospital and held hands with parents as their children passed. I never let water safety down.
Dave, how did you come to get so involved with water safety? Do you remember what it was?
Oh yeah. A friend of ours lost a child.
Oh, there was a neighbor, right?
It was up in North Dakota, up in Minnesota.
Okay.
It was in a lake in Minnesota. It was a childhood friend of my wife's, and Timmy was 2, and he fell into a lake, and a wave hit him. It was very innocent. He was being supervised by somebody that was too young to supervise him, and the first 3 people that got there did not know CPR. And I said, I'm going to change that.
That started it.
Yep.
Because here in Arizona, with all the pools, it is a constant threat. And I know fire worked with you on this, fire department worked with you on this. And
I walked into Steve Jensen's office and I said, do we have a drowning problem? He said, I've been waiting for you.
No kidding.
And we started working immediately.
What year was that? Do you recall?
1980.
Wow.
I might be off a little bit there. I'd have to
Since 1980.
Yeah, it's 35 years. Just go back 35.
Is it? I mean, you've obviously we do this television thing. It is for us a passion, but it is a job, and there are significant things that happen outside of just the day-to-day broadcasts that we do. This for you is the most significant.
If I continue anything, it'll be water safety. If I continue to do anything, it'll be water safety.
Can you stick around for another weekend?
Absolutely.
With me?
Absolutely.
All right. Dave Munsey, after 42 years, and we're going to continue our conversation. When you come back next weekend, more stories from Dave Munsey as we say goodbye to Really one of the pillars of this television station and the community. Dave Munsey. Thanks, Dave. And we're back next week with Dave.